mamas. I'm Lacey, your lactation counselor, and you're listening to the Early Motherhood Guide podcast, where motherhood is simply supported. Today, I have the opportunity to talk with Anouk. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I'm Anouk. I'm French Canadian, so hence the accent and probably a few mistakes. Sorry in advance. I have a master's degree in social work. I've been working as a social worker for a few years, and I left that job to start my own business to support parents in a different way. I work mostly on supporting parents develop parental confidence, and I used an approach of therapeutical photography mostly, but other kind of approach to do that. So.
Okay, nice. So we talked a lot today about parents' confidence, right? And so as a mom of three right now, I feel that I have more confidence than I did with my first, just because from trial and error. But how would you expect breastfeeding impact a parent's confidence in their ability to care for their child?
I would say, and I'm guessing it's different from country to country because the breastfeeding support that we get is different for sure. Some countries are better than others with that, but from the experience I have, I've been in the breastfeeding world for like 10 years, first 10 years of my kids. And I feel there's a lot of pressure on parents to breastfeed and not enough support. And so often parents moms mostly, they want to breastfeed. They're really like invested. And when it doesn't work or when it's hard, it can really affect their confidence in themselves. They're feeling like they're failing something, they're failing their parenting. And for some, it's like super invested in that, especially if, for example, the birth didn't go like they wanted. If they
Yeah.
had a C-section or if they got some medicine they didn't want it at first or anything that didn't go as planned, they invest in breastfeeding like as a catch-up to feel like a better mom. And when it doesn't work, it's devastating for lots of moms. So I feel it's a very cornerstone element that can be very detrimental when it doesn't go as planned. When it hurts, it can even hurt the relationship with the kid because moms are afraid to put the baby on the breast. So they there's something there also. So of course, if you cringe when your baby cries to eat because it hurts, it's not
Yeah.
good for your confidence, you know?
It's
So I think it can influence confidence in many ways.
yeah.
And it's a big part, like feeding is so much a big part of the beginning of parenthood. We associate to that. It's our main job to feed our babies, no matter how we feed them. So when it doesn't work as we wish, it's very hard for lots of moms.
Yeah, so true. And you touched on like when birth doesn't go according to plan, right? And it's
Mhm.
so funny how that's how life is in general, but I think very much in motherhood where we have this idea before we have our kids of like how it's going to go, like even to the point of how quickly you're going to get pregnant and then how
Yes.
your pregnancy is going to go and how you're going to react to the pregnancy. I'm just very much like a mover. And then the second I'm pregnant, I am like the total couch potato. And
That's
so
hard.
it is. And so I'm just like not used to being sitting and so still. And which is
Yeah.
also it's not a possibility when you have multiple. But and then, birth never goes as planned, ever, right? You
No.
kind of have this ideal of how it will go and how you want it to go. And yet that's just not the case. And so
No, at
breastfeeding
all.
is completely the
Same.
same with
It's kind
every
of a
part.
theme in parenting. Nothing goes as planned.
Yes, yeah. And so you have this thought like it should go this way. And yeah, and that's kind of why I started this podcast is because trying to shed a little light on how it can go and kind of add that realistic side so that it's not quite a shock for everyone once they get started.
For sure, for
Mm.
sure. And the more kids you have, the more you realize how much it not depends on you as a parent, but a lot on the kids also.
Yeah, it's a different
Like,
human, right?
yeah, definitely. So like they would breastfeed by themselves from birth, differently.
Yeah. How many kids do you have?
I have three.
Oh, nice. I do too. So have you breastfed all three of your kids?
Yes, I did. And it was three completely different experiences.
Really?
Like
Yeah.
really different.
Tell me about that.
My first, I would say it hurt. Like it was uncomfortable at least and was a bit like hurtful all the time I
Uh-huh.
breastfed him. And I just realized that my second that it was possible to not hurt at all.
Yeah.
Like it took me to breastfeed the second one and I was like, oh, that's possible. I was told it was not supposed to hurt,
Yeah.
but I was never able to reach that point. So I was like, okay, that's what it means not hurting. I can barely feel what she's doing when she feeds, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but for him, and I want to start by saying like, no matter how long people breastfeed, I think it doesn't matter because I did breastfeed like more and more for
Hmm.
my three kids, and pretty long for a lot of people. And there's a lot of things that go in. Like where I live, we have a year of paid maternity leave. So I was off work mainly for a year for each of my kids. So that's playing a big role in the time I can breastfeed easily. Because
Yeah.
when you go to work after like 3 weeks, it's much more complicated.
Yeah.
But so my first, I breastfed for around 21 months, I think. And I stopped when I was pregnant with my second because it started to be very too sensitive, like hurt way too much. But yeah, it hurt basically all the time. And I started when he was little to work for a breastfeeding or a community organism, like for
Nice.
supporting other moms, and as a volunteer also for another organism. Um, and with my second, it was pretty easy from the start, although she was like throwing up a lot,
Yeah.
but for completely different reasons. It was a respiratory reason. So she was
Oh,
coughing and then throwing up a lot. So that was another issue. Once that was resolved, it was pretty easy. There was nothing much there. But with my son, it was a very hard start. Um, and for her, I breastfed her almost 3 years. So she was pretty old when it felt. And I had to make her stop because she would have continued longer than that. But
yeah.
I was completely done. I was over it for a while. And she's not a very good sleeper, although also, so that played a big role. Um, like night feeding went on for almost those 3 years, like honestly,
Wow.
but like we recently learned that she's autistic, so that plays a big role because autistic child often have more difficulty sleeping than other kids.
Yeah.
um and my third, I breastfed her a 3 year and a half, I would say.
Mm.
And it was she was born 3 weeks early, and so it was a rougher start for her, especially. She was not like feeding enough. I had to pump. That was my first time having to pump with an electric pump. I was like, what's that thing? I hate that. And with my first, I was like dead set on my husband is gonna give a bottle every day. He gave one in a year because I was like, that's way too complicated. I
Yeah.
don't want
It's
to deal
actually
with
more work.
bottles and pumping and everything.
Yeah.
But then I didn't add a choice with my third because I had to pump because she was not taking enough. I had to increase my production and took supplements and things like that.
Yeah.
And it was really different because with my two first, I have like I don't know the exact English word for that, but like my milk is going out way too fast,
Yeah.
basically. So they have to deal with that flow and they
A
can cough
letdown.
on it and like get gas and things like that. So it was really new to me to have not enough milk because I used to
Yeah.
have way too much. I was pitting all over and I was like trying to do something with it, and then I had not enough. So yeah, pretty much three different experiences.
Yeah. Isn't that like interesting how you can really feel like you have it down? I mean, you have many years of experience breastfeeding,
Yes,
right? I have
yes,
5 total years over my 3 kids, and you even have more than that at this point, like for breastfeeding that long, which is so awesome. And it's so interesting that you still always have these stumbling blocks, but I would say it's
sure.
awesome that you worked through them all and you were still able to continue to nurse until
Yeah, and I would say I had lots of support. Being myself in this like leading like volunteers and leading an organization in support and having a contact direct with the nurse that was specialized, for me, it made a world of difference because I could super easily reach out for help and support. So
Yeah.
that is so important. And that's what I think is often playing a role on confidence and on like the length on when we breastfed is a lot to do with social pressure, support, and when we go back to work,
Yeah.
because that's a lot too. When you go back to work, I feel like the first 3 months of breastfeeding are not the most fun because you breastfeed all the time.
Yeah.
But after that, it gets much more relaxed. But if you go to work after 3 weeks or 3 months, you don't get the fun part of it. So it's
Yeah.
much more hard to keep on going because having to pump at work is not fun for anybody.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine someone having fun doing that.
I
But it's
know.
so easy when you can like just go out and don't have to bring bottles and things like that. It can be super easy.
Yeah.
So,
For sure. I do have some mamas that prefer to pump because they can just they got it down and they have it like they can just pump on their way to work and they just have
yeah.
no problem. And then others are like, I don't want to pump near me. Like I just can't stand being hooked to a machine. This is way more work. And yeah,
Yes.
I've done both and I totally see
And
both sides.
I do know people who decided to just pump because they had like body issues related to abuse or things like that. And
Mhm.
honestly, I commend anybody who pumps and breastfeed exclusively. Like for me, it's so much work. The main reason why I breastfeed is because it's easy and simple
Yeah.
and it takes less time and work from my part.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I would have breastfed at all if I had to pump all the time because it's more work than bottle because you just make the bottle and it's done. But if you
Yeah.
have to express your milk and then make the bottle and then it's much more work. So I feel that's also a big part of it.
Yeah, and with toddlers too, there's like it's so much comfort for them when you
Yes.
extend nursing. I have another podcast about extended nursing specifically, and yeah,
Mhm.
it just becomes like your tool, right? Like
Yes.
one of those tools in your tool belt, where it really gives you that confidence when you have it down and you're breastfeeding. It's like you can kind of handle any situation because you have like the ultimate tool that fixes
Yeah, it's
everything.
like the secret weapon.
Yes,
And
like no
even
matter
my
what.
husband even told me at some point, like, it's not fair. You have that tool that I don't have when the kids have
Yes.
meltdown or anything, they're tired or they're hungry. You have like, you just have a secret, and I don't have that. It's not fair. I find
But
that
it
to
is a
be
catch-all.
true. But at
Yeah.
the same time, like I realized at some point when you don't have it anymore, that you don't necessarily develop other tools. It's so easy to like to use
Yeah.
it that
Balance.
you when you stop, you're like, shoot, I need something else.
It's true. And you're like, oh no, my go-to's gone.
Yes. And you don't necessarily want to breastfeed in public at a certain point in
Yeah.
age because
Yeah.
it gets less socially acceptable, I would say.
Hmm.
And it's a perfectly, if people are comfortable, yeah, they can do it. I don't, but personally, after I would say 2 years old, I was not that comfortable like breastfeeding in public
Yeah.
because people are not looking at you the same way, I would say.
Yeah. They're
And the
like,
kids are moving so much, they're coming and leaving. It kind of gets a bit hard.
yeah, flashing everyone. And it's just,
Exactly.
yeah, some people don't mind and I'm full support of it. But yeah, I definitely became like more of a closet nurser once my youngest was old, like got older. Cause yeah, it's
Yeah,
different.
and I would say also like they don't breastfeed the same way when they're alone with you than when they're in public and there's lots of things to look at and
Very
that
distracted.
make the difference. And even just like loudly latch, it can hurt more if they're really distracted.
Yeah. I've seen this cartoon of the girl's called Elastic Girl. I don't know if you've heard from The Incredibles, and the mom is
Yeah.
breastfeeding her baby in the bed, and she's cooking dinner and on the phone at the same time in the kitchen. And like, I would love to have that tool where you can just breastfeed the baby to bed while you're making dinner. Like, I mean, what an
Yeah.
awesome tool if you could
I
have that.
did that with a baby carrier though.
Yes, you can do
Breastfeeding in
it.
the carrier while I was doing making dinner or doing it
Yes.
something with my oldest or name it. But yeah, walking around with a carrier, like that's something that at the first it took me so long to be able to do, like maybe 5 or 6 months.
Yeah.
But I managed again, I probably 5 days she was breastfeeding in the baby carrier.
Yeah. Yeah, I
because
was
you're
the
so
same.
more like, yeah. And she was feeding more easily also. Like that depends on the kids. My third was not as easy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they can at some point just latch on, no problem, and you're in that sweet spot of nursing, you
Yeah.
can kinda nurse everywhere. So you
Yeah.
talked about having a lot of support. So what kind of support systems are available for parents that do wanna breastfeed?
Yeah. Um, I'm sure that like it depends a lot of the country. And
Yeah.
I remember when I started in, and that's been 15 years now, but in the breastfeeding world, the saying here in Canada was that the main support for people who breastfeed here is the partner. In the US, it's the like mommy friends, so like a girlfriend, and in South America is the mom. So it's really different based on, and that's very general, of course, and
Yes.
it's definitely like changed from family to family. And but in general, like studies have looked at that, and that was the case 15 years ago. Is it still true today? I don't know. It might have changed, but I find that's very interesting to see that based on culture, it's not the same people who are
Mhm.
being the first support system from breastfeeding moms. Um, but I would say, other than that, there's also the healthcare system that is super important, especially when it doesn't go as planned or as easily as it should, because you need help from healthcare. And again, it changed from places to places, but here it's mostly nurses or lactation consultant that will do. But lactation consultant are most often not in the private sector. Nurses are in the public sector here. So nurses
Okay.
are free to access, but lactation consultant, there are some nurses that are also lactation consultant
Yeah.
that work in the public system, but not that much. And it's often more in hospitals.
Yeah.
Um, but that's definitely changed from places to places. And we have like, I wasn't part of a community organism, and there's like two here in Quebec. There's La Leche League,
Mhm.
which is like worldwide, and we have Nourrissource, which is really a Quebec-based organization that started in the 80s, and it's more like peer-to-peer support. So it's mom who breastfed who support other mom like La Leche, but it's
Mhm.
less involvement than La Leche. And it doesn't go to people's house. It's more like phone support or support, like group support in physical places.
Nice.
So I feel, and from all the people that I've been with, what came the most important part was the non-judgment and the openness of the person who was supporting them, especially when it's hard, and to have the option, like here, the public discourse is like breastfeed, 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 it's better, it's better, it's better. And it's a lot of pressure on parents, especially when it doesn't go as planned, or if they're not sure they want to breastfeed, because I was breastfed, but in the 80s, when I was born, it was not that common. So lots of parents were not breastfed themselves. Now it's more and more common as parents are younger, and like it's coming, but it was not that like. And I remember when I started, we were asking, were you breastfed, and have you ever seen a baby being breastfed? And more than half of the parents never had.
Yeah,
So
that
it
was
was
me.
not like normal in the culture, you know?
Yeah.
So it's a lot to ask to do something that you were not raised like that and you never saw anybody do.
Yeah.
It's really like a cultural change. We lost breastfeeding in the 50s, and then we're going back to it. But most people, it's not yet that mainstream. And we lost like the support. And that's why outside support like healthcare and peer-to-peer is important, because we lost the community support. If your mom didn't breastfeed, she cannot help you.
Yeah.
She don't know. She never experienced it herself, and she might be biased to bottles because it's how she raised her kids, and totally telling her that, yeah, but we know now that it's better to breastfeed, like scientifically, it's kind of insulting.
Yeah. So do you feel that the social pressure has changed over time, especially since you started to now of a parent? the parent's decision to breastfeed or not?
I'm not sure that the social pressure, like the official message haven't changed much.
Mhm.
I think what's changed the most is the social acceptance of people breastfeeding. Like it's happened less and less that you're looked at like a weirdo or told to go to the bathroom to breastfeed, you know.
Yeah.
I have like super like comments about sexuality when you breastfeed and like we don't see anything.
Yeah.
I mean, their publicity for like underwear that are much more revealing than a
Yeah.
mom's breastfeeding, you know? And that we see everywhere and we don't mind for some reason.
Yeah.
So I feel that's the part, like socially, it's more accepted, I think, than it was. So it's that part of the pressure of judgment of others because you're breastfeeding, like the government is saying, is telling you to do it, but people in the street is judging you because you're doing it. That's kind of a mixed message.
Yeah, it
So I
is.
feel that part is less intense, but the government part that didn't change much.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel it's still like it's the thing to do and you need to do it, and it can be very hard and you can feel like you fail if it doesn't work, and that you're like not a good mom
Yeah.
because you like you were not able to breastfeed, and there's so many reasons for breastfeeding not to go as planned.
Things happen for sure. Yeah, I definitely felt the difference between nursing my first baby and my third of how the social acceptance has changed
Mhm.
so much. And yes, it was like this huge push that like breast is best. But when it came to reality of the day to day, babies breastfeed all the time, and it's not like feasible for me to constantly just go to, and I don't want to go to a bathroom with my baby to eat. That's awful. And so yeah, I was just kind of unapologetic about it. But I definitely got some looks. And now that is not the case, but it is a bit more with toddlers, I would say.
Yeah.
So with that social pressure, do you find that any parents have made the decision about breastfeeding and that have later regretted it, whether that is to breastfeed or to not breastfeed?
I'm sure for anything in parenting, when we make a decision based on outside pressure,
Yeah.
and that's not true to what we really want to do, it's we might regret the decision or we might just have more trouble with it like on a daily basis. I find it's often like those parents who will have more trouble um going through when it's hard, that will like when during the night the baby is feeding often, it's harder for them because it doesn't go with their values and what they really want. When you're dead set on breastfeeding, you're going to go through a lot, sometimes a bit too much, to
Yeah.
be able to continue. Sometimes like I would say when as a social worker at some point sometime I was like, you know what, for your mental health now you need to let it go, because it's like if you're depressing, if you're in depression because you're breastfeeding, you need to let go at some point. It's just
Yeah.
detrimental to you and your baby. um but that's not the majority, of course. It's still a minority, but it does happen. But like I feel the people who are not that convinced and were convinced by outside pressure,
Mm.
everything is harder. Like all, and it's not just breastfeeding, it's anything that you do that is not true to yourself. When goes well, it goes well and it's okay, but when there's like roadblocks, it's always harder to go like over those, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I hear a lot of second-time moms say that they're not willing to push themselves as the way they did on their first and not be so hard on themselves because not only do they not want to go through that again, but they also can't because they have another child to take care of
Yeah,
at this point. Now it's a
yeah,
balancing act. But typically those problems that you had the first time are not the problems that you have the second
yeah,
time
sure.
anyway. It's not a problem. But then
And
again,
it, like often it's the same kind of thing,
yeah,
so you can like, okay, that worked the first time, I'm gonna do
yes.
that now instead of waiting 3 weeks.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So you can also prevent the problems from the beginning,
Yeah,
right? That
yeah.
you do have. And then also the opposite, like I know a lot of moms that decide to they wish that they hadn't given up, and I say that in parentheses, you know,
Mhm,
because it's not
mhm.
they felt like they gave up too soon and wish they gave it another push. I know many moms that have wished that.
Yeah.
And I think it's more of just having the support and having more
Yes.
grace for yourself. You know, it's not doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing. And,
Yes.
you know, it's really just enjoying it. And studies have shown that the more that you just relax and just enjoy it, not about how exclusively, like how much you do it, but just enjoying the time that you do have to nurse your baby,
Mhm.
it's shown to go you go way longer in
Yes,
breastfeeding,
definitely. That's
you
for
know?
sure. It like that's what I was like. If you can just breastfeed easily the first few weeks because you go back to work very
Yeah.
early, you don't have really an opportunity to enjoy your feeding journey as much. And even like those studies, they show that when you're too stressed, your milk
Yes.
supply is gonna lower. So it's counterproductive.
Yeah, it really is because yeah, you're not gonna have a letdown, and there's oxytocin's not gonna be flowing if you're
Exactly.
completely stressed, so I don't yeah. That's when a lot of mamas have hard time with pumping because 'cause they're just like, "Oh, I cannot." Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
feed
it's
breastfeed.
hard to pump when you need to. It's really not like the fun for those of like when it's a choice, it's a thing, but when you need to and it's not what you plan,
Yeah.
it's like everything else. But I feel like that planning thing, and that's a big thing in breastfeeding. You cannot plan and you cannot
Mhm.
control
Yeah.
the amount of milk that the baby is taking. And that's something I feel, and it comes
Mhm.
back to what we were talking in the beginning, the control part. We're a society, like the Western societies, it's very control based. Like
Mhm.
we control everything from our education, where we work, our schedule, our everything. And then when the kids arrive, we lose so much of the control.
Tumbling.
And it's not easy.
Yeah. So, how do you think society can be better about supporting moms and parents in general on their feeding choices?
I would say it start with the message that we send about choices.
Mhm.
Exactly. It's a choice. There are some countries when it's not really a choice because like bottle feeding is not safe and is not easily available and it costs too much.
Yeah.
But in many countries it is a choice. And if you choose not to, you're not a worse mom or worse parents than if you choose to breastfeed. So I would say that's the first thing. And most of the time when you have a real choice, you make the right one when you have the right information.
Yeah.
But like it needs to be a real choice and not a pressure to do something. um and then it like the support needs to be easily available and accessible to people, because I find that, and often the second breastfeeding goes better because at the first they found help, but
Mhm.
it took too long. When like when they stopped before they wanted to, it took too long. But then at the second they already know where to find the help, so they go, and often they will reach out before even giving birth to make sure they have the right support from the get-go.
Yeah.
So I find that having that pre-birth, knowing in advance where to go get help if things go as planned,
Yeah.
makes a huge difference. So the access to support, and as we touched on, the way we support people. And that's not just on breastfeeding, it's everything parenting. There's so much judgment going on. Like I remember when I was doing like in-person pre-COVID,
Mhm.
in-person breast support, like breastfeeding support, we had doctors that were like students, like interns, or that were
Mhm.
coming just like for one day just to see how it was going, what we were doing. And I was always telling them, you know what, all the moms who come to see you, they lie to you because they don't want you to judge.
Yeah.
And all of them were like, what are you saying? I was like they all come here saying that they told X to their doctor, but that was not true. And they asked us the real thing because they feel we're not going to judge. And so that's something that and it's not just doctor, and some doctors don't judge. Like it's really also, it's not profession based, but that I think it's a general feeling that people have, that doctors are, because they ask very specific question like, are your kids sleeping at night? And like you're yeah, sleeping, and you don't want a doctor to judge you, but that's
Yeah.
not true at all, And so and it's other parents that judge. It's our parents, it's aunts, uncle, and the society in general. Like, and anybody in the grocery store will judge you if your kids cry at the wrong time.
Yes. Yeah, it's hard.
So the judgment is so easy on parents, and breastfeeding is often super vulnerable. So it's even worse, I feel, in breastfeeding than other area of parenting. But less judgment is so important, and it's not easy.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on, and all like in the society and in the healthcare system and everywhere in parenting, there's a lot of judgment. So that's a big part of the what would help, I feel, because when you feel judged, you don't say the truth, and if we don't have the truth, we cannot help for real.
Yeah. And a lot of moms say they feel alone in doing this.
Yeah,
So how can we educate these people without on the benefits of breastfeeding, but without making them feeling guilty on what they choose regardless?
that's a very good question. I think it's how we say things. I remember I was as a volunteer in the prenatal course about breastfeeding, and there was one thing that was really bothering me in the information that was shared, especially was that based on studies, the kids who were breastfed higher IQs. And that was something that was like, I could not let that one slide just like it. So and it was like a common ground with the nurse teaching the course.
Mhm.
I was always interrupting at that point and giving context. And it's like, in the context for that is like, it's not the milk that makes the difference, is the relationship with the parents. And when you breastfeed, you don't have the choice but to have the baby close to you, and it's the distance of the, like when you look at your baby, it's a distance that the baby sees correctly from birth. Like, and when you give a bottle, you can do the exact same thing, but it's much easier to put the baby like down and feed the baby from afar, doing something else at the same time. Although you can definitely be on your phone when you breastfeed or read a book, but it's easier not to when you give a bottle.
Yeah.
And it's not because you breastfeeded the baby as a better IQ or a better relationship. It's just the way you feed your baby. If you take your baby in your arm and always give the bottle and give attention to the baby, it will give the same results.
Yeah.
So I feel it's giving context with those data. It's just so easy to say breastfeeding is better, the baby are gonna have a higher IQ. Yeah, but if I don't breastfeed, I feel bad with that data if there's no context.
Yeah.
So it's how you and it's way easier to give this the first, and it has more impact. And we're gonna convince people, and no, we don't convince people. We educate people, and they do educated choices.
Yes, definitely.
And that's the difference. And it's how you present the data and how we present the information.
Yeah.
I feel that like nuance is always important when you give those kind of information, and being open. Like I always said that as an organism, we were supporting people no matter how long they decided to breastfeed. We
Yeah.
could just support you in making a decision. You decide to breastfeed 3 days, it's good. 3 weeks, good. 3 years, good. I don't care. Like, it's your experience. And we were also supporting people once they stopped, if they needed support, because some parents, it's hard when it stopped before they wanted to,
Hmm.
and suddenly all the support disappears because you stop breastfeeding, and everyone who was involved in supporting you is gone.
Yeah.
So it's hard because you lost the support and you stop breastfeeding. It's kind of, some parents are grieving
Yeah, for
if
sure.
they stop earlier than they wanted to. So like the support was going to the end of that grieving period
Yeah, for
too.
sure. I love that. Yeah, I with my first two, I definitely didn't breastfeed as long as I wanted. My goal was always 2 years, which is a lofty goal now that from experience of seeing mamas and going from my experience. And yeah, there's quite the mourning process when you don't hit that goal because you can do as much as you want and you're determined, but there are some things that you can't control another human being at the same time. So
No,
yeah. So how
no.
Why is this important for parents to receive this non-judgmental support when it comes to their feeding choices?
Um, I would say it's really because it's when you judge, you have an impact on people's confidence.
Yeah.
Like it as much as people can try to don't feel that judgment, it still has an impact. And it's a lot of work to ask new parents who are insecure in what they're doing. It's new, and it's
Yeah.
very vulnerable. When you breastfeed, it's your body, it's exposed. People are playing with your breast. I mean,
Yeah.
and so it's yeah, it's really something that like it will impact their confidence. And if they're not confident, they're probably going to stop earlier, because
Yeah.
when they're going to hit a bump, they won't have the confidence to go over or to go get help. And if they get help and they get judged, next time they won't ask for help.
Yeah.
If it's very, and it's not just breastfeeding, it's any support, like if they feel they're going to get judged, they will be afraid to ask for help. And so they're not going to get it when they need it. And it can be very dangerous, because it can be something else than breastfeeding. It
Hmm.
can, like, if they're going into postnatal depression and they are afraid to ask, and that's something that you're judged a lot and you feel judgment to yourself, you
Yeah.
get a postnatal depression. And if you've been judged because you've breastfed and it didn't work and you felt judgment there, and you're not going to go get help if you don't feel good after that. So it has a very big impact on
Yeah.
parents.
So where do you think where can moms get these resources to have that non-judgmental support?
That's a very hard question, because I feel it's not like profession dependent, it's not like it's location dependent, it's people dependent.
Yeah.
So what in general, what I say is like, trust yourself. If you go see someone and you feel what that person is telling you don't resonate with you and you feel uncomfortable, leave and go
Yeah.
elsewhere. Because it means two things: it's just not the right person for you, and that's okay, or that person is really judgmental and it's not going to help. So as much as you can, just go elsewhere, because it's very hard. Like, in any kind of support, you know very fast if it fits or if it doesn't fit. Like in the first 15 minutes in general, if you feel uncomfortable, it's just not the right fit,
Yeah.
because it's that person's job to make you feel good, and
Yeah.
not the other way around. Like if you feel you cannot say everything, and you say
Yeah.
something and you feel uncomfortable with the reaction, just go elsewhere.
Yeah. Call it early.
I would love to like give it a specific address and names, but
Yeah.
it's just not possible, because it's really like, there's incredible doctors, there's horrible doctors, there's incredible nurses, there's horrible nurses, like, and it's true for any profession, any kind of, like, in the private sector you can have incredible people and horrible people, like, it's true for everything. So
Yeah.
we cannot, like, there's no one. And I wish, as much as I wish I could say like non-profits would be a very great way, good, like, place to go, it's not always true.
Yeah.
Most of the time it is, and often it's probably the best, but sometimes it's not. I've heard horrible experiences too with like nonprofits. So there's really not like universal answer to the
Yeah, for
question.
sure.
I wish there was. I wish there was not, like, we didn't add to ask that question. I
Yeah.
wish it was universal and that everyone would have that approach with parents, because like empowerment approach, like, that give parents the power. Like, parents are the specialists of their kids. They're the one who knows best that kid, even when the kid's only 5 weeks old or 5 days old. They're still the one who passed the most time with that baby,
Yeah.
and they're the one that knows that baby better than any professional. Yeah, they know babies in general maybe better than that baby, but, or the parents, that they don't know that specific child.
Yeah.
So
We are the experts in our home and our children. I totally agree.
yeah, exactly. So as long as the person supporting you believes that and gives space for that experiential experience, like,
Yeah.
the one we really live on a daily basis, it has value.
Yeah,
It's not a degree, it's not any professional title, but it has a lot of value. It needs to be considered.
for sure. Well, thank you so much. And this was such a special conversation. I really enjoyed it. And is there
Thank
anything
you.
else that you would like to add?
No, I think that we covered
Okay.
we covered it all. It was very fun talking to you.
Me too. Where can these mamas find you?
My website is familymoments.ca because I'm in Canada.
Yes.
And I have a realistic self-care guide for parents that is available on my website, very easy to find. And it's the same kind of approach to healthcare, like something that is true to you,
Yeah.
that is not, you should do that thing as self-care because that's not working. If you tell me to take a bath, I will just cry because I hate taking baths. So it's not that kind of guide. It's really a
Yeah.
way to find what's feeding yourself as self-care because especially on new moms,
Yeah.
it's so hard.
Yeah.
And finding little pockets of times to do self-care in our life and with our kids. And that's a big part. Like we think that self-care needs to be in 24-hour away in a hotel, but it's often not possible when you have a new baby.
Yeah.
So how can you find ways to take care of yourself while taking care of your baby?
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much. And I will definitely add that into the show notes as well.
Thank you very much and have
Yes.
a nice day.
You too. Thanks, guys, so much for joining us. And I will see you next week on the Early Motherhood Guide podcast.